The Interstellar Coalition prided itself on many things: diplomatic efficiency, technological superiority, and most importantly, their ability to turn perfectly rational beings into paranoid survival enthusiasts through a single training program. The facility on Caraxis 7 wasn't just any military installation. It was the installation where the Coalition's finest came to prove they could eat moss and drink their own recycled sweat with dignity. The planet itself was a geological middle finger to comfortable living, featuring acid rain on Tuesdays, electrical storms on Thursdays, and an ambient temperature that couldn't decide whether it wanted to freeze or roast its inhabitants. Naturally, the Coalition's top brass had looked at this hellscape and thought, perfect place for character building. Commandant Vrex'thal ran this operation with the warmth of a black hole and twice the gravitational pull on one's sense of self-worth. The reptilian officer had seen 400 cycles of trainees pass through these programs, and his philosophy remained brutally simple: survive alone or don't survive at all. Cooperation was for the weak, teamwork was for civilians. Real warriors, according to the carefully crafted doctrine, needed to prove they could function as isolated units of pure capability. The logic was sound if you ignored thousands of years of evolution across dozens of species, proving that social cooperation was literally how most sentient beings conquered their respective food chains. But who needed evolutionary biology when you had military tradition? Into this cheerful environment dropped Devin Holt, human, 26 Earth years old, and already regretting every decision that led to this moment. Humans were still the new kids in Coalition space, barely 2 generations since first contact, and they had an unfortunate tendency to volunteer for things without reading the fine print. The recruitment poster had shown smiling soldiers in clean uniforms, standing heroically against alien sunsets. The poster had not mentioned 72 hours of eating things that might be food while sleeping in holes that might have scorpions, or the local equivalent. Devin wasn't entirely sure Caraxis 7 had scorpions, but the universe had a pattern, and that pattern usually involved things with too many legs trying to crawl into warm places. The briefing room held 37 trainees from 17 different species. Vrex'thal stood at the front, his scales catching the harsh artificial light, making him look like a very disappointed dragon who'd just reviewed your quarterly performance metrics. You will be dispersed across designated zones. Vrex'thal's voice carried the kind of authority that made junior officers stand straighter in other star systems. You will survive using only the standard emergency kit. You will not communicate. You will not cooperate. You will not seek assistance from other trainees. Survival is individual. Failure is not acceptable, but it is educational. You have 72 hours. Dismissed. No inspirational speech. No good luck out there. Just the warm, encouraging energy of a military officer who'd seen too many idiots try to eat the local wildlife and lose. Devin appreciated the honesty. At least, better than false comfort before being thrown into nature's least favorite spin cycle. The drop pods were exactly as comfortable as expected, which was to say, not at all. Devin's landed in a rocky canyon system with all the grace of a drop toolbox, sending local bird equivalents scattering in indignant screeches. The emergency kit contained standard items: water purification tablets, basic medical supplies, a thermal blanket that looked about as sturdy as a politician's promise, energy rations that tasted like compressed sadness, and a multi-tool that could theoretically do everything except make this experience pleasant. First priority: shelter. The canyon walls offered options, several caves and overhangs that could provide protection from the elements. Devin selected a spot Elevated enough to avoid flash flooding, but accessible enough to defend. Standard procedure, straight from the manual. Set up the thermal blanket as a windbreak, arrange rocks for a fire pit, identify water sources. The nearby stream looked clean enough after purification, and the local plant life included several species that matched the database's probably won't kill you category. Hour 1 was going smoothly. Hour 3 was when everything went sideways. The cave Devin had marked as a secondary shelter option turned out to be occupied. Not by dangerous predators or territorial wildlife, but by something infinitely more complicated. 3 small aliens huddled together, making sounds that crossed the universal language barrier of pure misery. They were Velkari, a warrior species known for their pride, honor and unfortunate tendency to start honor duels over seating arrangements. These particular Velkari were young, maybe equivalent to human 7-year-olds, with downy fur that hadn't yet developed adult patterns and eyes far too large for their narrow faces. They were also absolutely terrified. Devin's translator unit picked up fragments, crashed transport, separated from family group, lost, hungry, cold. The kind of situation that training manuals technically covered under unexpected civilian complications and practically covered under not your problem. Stay focused on the mission. The logical choice was obvious. Report the situation, continue solo survival, let the proper authorities handle civilian rescues. That was protocol. That was the smart play. That was exactly what would happen if Devin was any species other than human. Well, damn, Devin muttered, already knowing this decision was going to be complicated to explain later. The Velkari cubs, Kitcher, Velrin and Morpak, according to their halting introductions, watched with suspicious eyes as Devin approached. Their species didn't trust easily, and human faces apparently registered somewhere between unknown and possibly a threat in their instinctual threat assessment. All right, small terrifying warriors in training. Devin kept the tone light, non-threatening. Here's the situation. I'm technically supposed to be doing a solo survival thing. You're technically not supposed to be here. But since the universe has a sense of humor, we're going to ignore technicalities and focus on not dying. Sound good? Kitcher, the boldest of the 3, growled something that the translator rendered as "we don't need human help," but with enough vocal trembling to undermine the bravado. Sure, absolutely. You're doing great. Devin agreed easily. That's why you're sitting in a cave making sad noises. Very effective survival strategy. Really intimidating to potential predators. The sarcasm didn't translate perfectly, but the tone apparently did. Velrin made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a hiccup. Progress. Getting the cubs back to the main shelter involved some creative problem-solving. They could walk but tired quickly, unused to extended physical exertion beyond training drills. Devin ended up carrying Morpak, the smallest, while the other 2 managed the journey with frequent breaks. The emergency kit definitely hadn't included enough supplies for 4 individuals, which meant the next 70 hours were going to involve creative rationing and aggressive foraging. The shelter needed expansion. What had been adequate for 1 human now required weatherproofing for 4 bodies with different temperature tolerances. Devin gathered additional branches, reinforced the windbreak, created a better insulated sleeping area using local vegetation that probably wouldn't cause allergic reactions. Probably. The cubs watched with varying degrees of interest and skepticism. "Why do you collect the silver moss?" Kitcher demanded, her translator making her sound like a very imperious small adult. "Because silver moss is hydrophobic, water rolls right off." We layer it with the broader leaves, create a waterproof barrier, keeps us dry if it rains. Velkari don't fear water. Great. Velkari also don't enjoy hypothermia. I'm guessing dry is better. Teaching moment number 47, showing young aliens how to purify water using tablets and solar distillation. The cubs found this fascinating. Apparently their survival training had focused more on defeat your enemies and less on make sure the water doesn't defeat your intestines. On your world, do warriors not learn proper resource management? Velrin asked, seeming genuinely curious. On my world we have a saying, even the strongest warrior is useless if they die from drinking bad water. Very old saying. Very wise. Devin was absolutely making this up. Ancient human proverb. Morpak, who'd been quiet since arriving, finally spoke up. Are all humans this prepared? Prepared is a strong word. We're more anxiously trying to avoid preventable disasters through excessive planning. The food situation required creativity. Energy rations divided 4 ways wouldn't last. Devin spent the remaining daylight hours identifying edible plants, setting basic snares for small game, and teaching the cubs which local berries were safe. The Velkari were natural learners, their pride demanding they master each new skill immediately. This led to a competition over who could start a fire faster using the friction method. Devin demonstrated. Kitcha won, then immediately declared herself fire champion of the entire canyon. The declaration lasted until Velrin pointed out that championships required defending one's title, which sparked an argument that Devin had to mediate before it escalated into actual combat. Warrior species, even young ones, had aggressive instincts. Night fell with characteristic speed on Caraxis 7. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in an hour, and the ambient sounds of the canyon changed to the nighttime chorus of things that hunted in darkness. The cubs pressed closer to the fire, their earlier bravado fading into the natural wariness of children in an unfamiliar place. Tell us about human territory, Morpak requested quietly. Is it like this? Parts of it. Devin fed another branch into the fire. Earth has many different environments. Deserts, forests, mountains, oceans. Some places are gentle, some are harsh. Humans learn to survive in all of them. Because humans are great warriors. Because humans are stubborn and don't know when to quit. We're not the strongest, or the fastest, or the most naturally dangerous. We're just really persistent about not dying. This concept seemed to resonate with the Velkari understanding of honor through endurance. Kitcha nodded seriously, as if Devin had shared profound military wisdom instead of basic human stubbornness. The second day brought challenges. Their food supplies were adequate but not abundant. Devin's snares caught 2 small creatures that resembled rabbits, if rabbits had 6 legs and scales. The cubs were initially skeptical about eating something that looked so strange, until hunger overrode aesthetic concerns. Devin walked them through basic field preparation, trying not to think about how this definitely wasn't solo survival anymore. In Velkari training, we hunt in packs, Velrin observed, watching Devin work. But each warrior must make their own kill. Sounds complicated. It teaches us to be strong alone, but stronger together. Devin paused, considering this. Your people figured out something my people took a long time to learn. Being able to survive alone is important. Choosing to survive together is stronger. Kitcha, never one to let philosophy go unchallenged, pointed out. But your commandant says we must survive alone. The commandant has opinions. The universe has facts. Sometimes those don't match. This was probably heresy by coalition training standards, but Devin was already so far off protocol that philosophical rebellion seemed minor by comparison. The storm hit late on the second day, with the subtlety of an artillery barrage. The sky went from clear to apocalyptic in 20 minutes, clouds rolling across the canyon like an invading army. Wind screamed through the rock formations, carrying the ozone smell of imminent electrical discharge. Devin had approximately 5 minutes to secure everything before the first drops hit. Everyone inside, now. The cubs scrambled into the improved shelter as lightning began painting the sky in brilliant white veins. Rain followed, not gentle precipitation but aggressive sheets of water that seemed personally offended by the existence of dry ground. The shelter held, barely. Water found every possible weakness in the construction, requiring constant adjustment and repositioning of the waterproofing layers. The cubs huddled together, their earlier confidence evaporated in the face of nature's spectacular tantrum. Thunder rolled through the canyon with physical force, each boom making Moorpack flinch. "It's all right." Devin kept the tone steady, matter of fact. "Storms are loud, but this shelter is solid. We're elevated, we're insulated, we're protected." "Velkari don't fear storms," Kitcher insisted, somewhat undermined by how tightly she gripped Velrin's arm. "Nobody said anything about fear. Being cautious during dangerous weather is just smart." Lightning struck close, too close, the accompanying thunder instantaneous and deafening. Moorpack made a sound of pure distress, and Devin made an executive decision that definitely wasn't in any manual. "All right, story time. On Earth, humans have been dealing with storms since before we had proper shelter. Want to know how ancient humans stayed calm during weather like this?" 3 pairs of large alien eyes fixed on Devin with desperate attention. They told stories. Made up tales about why storms happened, what they meant, turned something scary into something understandable. Devin launched into an improvised narrative involving sky spirits having arguments, thunder being their loud voices, lightning being their way of pointing at things during debates. It was complete nonsense, but it was engaging nonsense, and the cubs latched onto it like a lifeline. The story evolved, incorporating elements the cubs suggested, becoming increasingly ridiculous as they tried to one-up each other with plot additions. By the time the storm began to subside, they'd created an elaborate mythology involving sky spirits, mountain spirits, and an entire political structure of elemental beings having dramatic conflicts. Velrin declared it should be written down as official Velkari human collaborative mythology. The aftermath of the storm brought new problems. Water had gotten into the emergency supply kit, ruining half the remaining rations. Several snares had been destroyed. The surrounding area was transformed into a muddy maze that would take hours to navigate safely. Their resource situation had gone from tight but manageable to concerning. Devin took inventory with mounting awareness that this was going to be a very long final day. The cubs, however, seemed energized rather than discouraged. The storm had been a shared challenge, survived together, and it had apparently triggered some kind of warrior bonding instinct. "We should hunt," Kitcher announced with newfound authority. "Velkari can track prey. Can young Velkari track prey?" Devin asked skeptically. "We've had training." This was technically true. Kitcher's tracking skills turned out to be reasonably developed for her age. Together with Devin's knowledge of the local area, they managed to locate and secure enough food for everyone. Velrin proved surprisingly adept at identifying edible plants, while more pack discovered a talent for starting fires that bordered on concerning. The small Velkari seemed to enjoy combustion a bit too enthusiastically. The third day passed in a blur of survival tasks and unexpected teaching moments. Devin showed them human songs, simple hiking melodies that translated poorly but amused greatly. The cubs taught Devin basic Velkari combat stances, which mostly involved aggressive lunging and intimidating growls. Everyone agreed that humans were better at survival skills than combat poses, while Velkari excelled at looking threatening but needed work on fire safety. The extraction signal came early on the 72nd hour, not the standard completion alert, but an emergency override code. Devin's communication unit activated with Vrex'thal's unmistakable voice. Trainee Holt, your biosignature readings indicate multiple life forms at your location. Explain. There wasn't really a good way to explain this that would sound better than the truth. Sir encountered 3 Velkari juveniles separated from transport. They required assistance. The pause that followed could have flash-frozen a small moon. You were ordered to survive alone. Yes, sir. I survived. They also survived. We just happened to survive in the same location using shared resources. That is not. Vrex'thal's voice did something complicated that the translator struggled to render. Remain at your location. Extraction team incoming. The extraction shuttle arrived 30 minutes later, landing with the kind of precision that suggested the pilot was very annoyed about this entire situation. Vrex'thal emerged, his scales somehow expressing disappointment through pure body language. Behind him came 2 other coalition officers and a very worried-looking Velkari adult, who immediately rushed toward the cubs. The reunion was loud, emotional, and involved a lot of Velkari crying that their translators insisted was actually warrior joy expressions and not tears at all. The adult pack leader Threnka, according to his formal introduction, kept alternating between embracing his youngsters and checking them for injuries. Vrex'thal surveyed the shelter with the expression of someone whose entire worldview was being challenged by physical evidence. The construction was solid. The resource management was efficient. The cubs were not just alive, but clearly thriving, chattering excitedly about water purification and fire starting and sky spirit mythology. You failed the exercise, Vrex'thal stated flatly. Yes, sir. You violated direct orders regarding solo survival protocol. Yes, sir. You prioritized civilian welfare over training completion. Yes, sir. Vrex'thal turned to face Devin fully, his reptilian eyes unreadable. And in doing so, you demonstrated resource management, tactical adaptation, teaching capability, emergency response, and the ability to maintain operational effectiveness while managing dependence in hostile environment. That seemed like a strange way to describe being bad at following orders. Pack leader Threnka approached, his cubs now clustered behind him, but watching Devin with obvious attachment. Commandant, if I may speak. Vrex'thal gestured permission. My youngsters were lost for 4 cycles. Cold, hungry, terrified. This human found them and provided not just survival, but education, teaching, care. Threnka's translator struggled with the next word, rendering it several different ways before settling on honor. This human showed honor to Velkari cubs when there was no benefit, only cost. This is the behavior of true warriors. The training protocol specifically requires. Your protocol, Threnka interrupted, which was apparently quite bold given Vrex'thal's rank, assumes survival is individual achievement. Velkari know differently. Pack survives together. The strongest warrior is one who protects the pack, especially the young. He paused, then added with what sounded like pointed deliberation, "Even human warriors understand this, apparently." The political implications were sailing entirely over Devin's head, but Vrex'thal's expression suggested he understood perfectly. The Velkari were a significant coalition member species. Their approval carried weight. "The human failed the exercise," Vrex'thal repeated, but something in his tone had shifted. "However, given the unusual circumstances and successful civilian protection outcome, this failure will be recorded as..." He paused, clearly pained by what he was about to say. "Exemplary protocol deviation with commendable results," which was apparently military bureaucracy for you broke all the rules, but somehow that worked out. "We hate it, but also can't actually punish you." Kitcher, never one to stay quiet when declarations could be made, announced loudly, "Human Devin is honorary PAC. We declare it. You cannot declare." Threnka started, then stopped, seeing the determined expressions on all three cubs. "Actually, yes. I support this declaration. Human Devin Holt is recognized as pack friend to Clan Threnka." This was apparently a significant honor, judging by the reactions from the other coalition officers. Vrex'thal looked like he'd bitten into something sour, but was too professional to spit it out. The flight back to base was surreal. The cubs refused to be separated from Devin, chattering constantly about everything they'd learned, and everything they wanted to teach other Velkari about human survival methods. Threnka sat quietly, radiating grateful approval. Vrex'thal spent the entire trip reviewing data on his tablet with the energy of someone whose carefully structured training program had just encountered a variable that didn't fit any of his models. Back at base, word had already spread. Humans, it turned out, had done the most human thing possible, encountered suffering children, and completely ignored orders in favor of helping them. The story was simultaneously being recorded as a failure in the official training logs and as a diplomatic success in coalition relations reports. The administrative confusion was spectacular. Devin's official evaluation read, "Failed to complete solo survival protocol, demonstrated advanced capability in resource management, tactical adaptation, and civilian protection. Recommendation: advanced training in leadership roles where protocol deviation may be strategically valuable," which was the most bureaucratic way possible to say, "This human can't follow orders, but maybe that's occasionally useful." 3 weeks later, the coalition military updated their survival training protocols. The new version included a section on ethical intervention scenarios and protective responsibility override conditions. It didn't explicitly mention the incident on Caraxis 7, but everyone knew exactly what had prompted the change. The Velkari Diplomatic Corps sent an official commendation. Pack leader Threnka's clan sent a ceremonial weapon, which was apparently how Velkari said, "Thank you for not letting our children die." Kicha sent messages every 3 days, usually consisting of demands to teach her more Earth songs and updates on her progress toward becoming the youngest pack leader in Velkari history. Vrex'thal never explicitly acknowledged that maybe, possibly, his training protocols had a blind spot. But the next cycle of trainees received a briefing that included one additional line: "Solo survival is crucial. However, abandonment of those in critical need is not strength, it is failure of a different kind," which was probably the closest a military officer of his generation could come to admitting that humans had accidentally been right about something. And somewhere in coalition space, floating through various military networks, a new piece of informal wisdom circulated among trainees. If you want to pass coalition survival training, follow the protocols. If you want to actually survive, ask a human. They're the ones who'll burn their own resources helping you while making sarcastic comments about how this isn't technically their problem. Terrifying creatures, really. Especially when they're being kind. The universe, as it turned out, had a sense of irony. The species that joined the coalition dead last, with the least impressive natural advantages, somehow kept demonstrating that survival wasn't about being the strongest alone. It was about being strong enough to help others, even when it cost you personally. Humans failing military exercises and succeeding at being decent since 2157. The coalition was still adjusting to the implications.